Welcome back to Fast Market here on the TD Ameritrade Network. Let's bring in our next guest for our cash tag segment, and that's going to be Andy Swan, co-founder at LikeFolio. Welcome back to the show, Andy.
Thank you. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday to you. So perfect timing talking about Roku. Got a nice upgrade today. It's done really well, bouncing back here in 2023. Do you have data out of LikeFolio that supports the bullish move that we've seen so far this year?
Yeah, we do. I think the bullish move may be a little overdone for this year, but we see where everybody's coming from. We agree with the analyst in this case. Overall, the streaming market's pretty flat. There's only so much that people can consume. So from a content perspective, from a software perspective, even from a hardware perspective, there's now kind of a limit to this category that wasn't there in years past. We're kind of hitting those limits of how much people can consume. But in terms of brand recognition and brand power, Roku's in a really, really positive spot versus peers. This is a company that has grown in terms of consumer demand right up there with the Apple TV, and really dominating against Amazon's and Google's competitive devices. And one reason for that, we think, is people are really looking for that integrated solution. I know this was very controversial when Roku decided they were going to start making and manufacturing TVs for sale instead of just the box that plugs in or just the software that plugs into existing manufacturers. And we actually think that this may turn out to be Roku's best move, because while the streaming industry is somewhat capped right now, the shift from wanting a device that plugs in to a TV to a smart TV is really underway. We see smart TV usage mentions up 27% year over year and growing. And so for Roku, we think they're making a bet in the right direction with their entrance into the actual TV manufacturing business. They have the brand recognition to do it. They have great software that people trust, and everybody's kind of looking for that all-in-one integrated solution that Roku can finally bring to them.
Andy, I love that you bring this up, because, whether or not ultimately in the end what happens with Roku, I think still remains pretty polarized, and for good reason, to be fair. But I don't think anybody can disagree with the sentiment that you're expressing here, which is that the leadership at Roku knows where they operate, where they stand, and what's potentially coming next. They have invested seemingly extremely intelligently in terms of where they're focusing their brand, and they've done so very effectively. The movement into TVs was a necessary transition as more and more of the existing televisions became smart TVs. You don't need that box anymore. So it seems now that the brand is essentially their user interface, their UI. They're familiar. You go stay at an Airbnb, if it's a Roku TV, you instantly know how to use it, as opposed to if it's some other brand that you don't have, you click around for a little bit. That is essentially their IP. That is essentially the brand at this point. I know that they've made some forays into content, but none of it's been extremely successful. Not to say that they are, home clear here, Andy, and that somebody like Apple can't come in and disrupt it. I think it's likely and maybe even possible that it's going to be a tough battle. But there has been companies, and Apple's really the representation of that. If you have a user interface people like, and you build on that, you can be there's limitless potential. The iOS is what Apple built off of. And so what can Roku do now that they're going head to head with iOS? Because essentially everywhere iOS has gone, it's won that battle.
Yeah, well, I think that's true. I think that, Apple ultimately is Roku's biggest competitor. But what Roku can do and what they are doing is what they have done, and that what they have done consistently, and that is stay ahead of the competition and stay ahead of the consumer. They're really a driver of how consumers use things. They are dictating, a lot like Apple did with the iPhone and that iOS interface. It wasn't that consumers were demanding a touchscreen, multi-touchscreen interface and all of these different ways to interact with a device. Apple brought them to the future, and I feel like that's what Roku does pretty well. Not Apple-like, not iPhone-like, but they're getting there, and that's their big bet, and that's their best play. And so I think, our sentiment, I agree with you in general, and that is Roku's doing what it needs to do, what it can do, and it's doing it very, very well. The content side of the business aside, where they lose a lot of money, I think they could focus a little bit more, and they're probably doing that. But overall, this is a company that executes really well and takes leadership positions in a growing industry. That's something that we always like to see at LikeFolio, and it's good to see Roku really hone in on this opportunity in smart TVs.
Yeah, they're starting to pick up a little bit of digital ad spend, but you got that mentions count up where it's kind of up 11% year over year, which is positive for Roku, maybe on the back of some of the gains that they've seen, because right now they've got over 70 million accounts at the end of 2022, Andy. Is this like a warning shot that, hey, if you're in the streaming business, you can't ignore Roku because so many people are on that platform, and that's why we're seeing maybe this tick up in mentions count at this point, because, you know, I think it's hard for a lot of people just to kind of wrap their head around, hey, I subscribe to 5 streaming services. Right. I need an aggregator. Help me.
Yeah, you need an interface that makes everything work, just like it would be a nightmare to interface with all of the separate apps that you have on your iPhone in a separate internet world. Apple brings that all together. They're the gatekeeper, and then they make money on the transactions that happen through those processes. Roku's basically in the same line of business. And so if they can continue to make that user interface simple, easy, intuitive, and drive people towards the content and partners that share the most revenue with them, quite frankly, they're in a very good spot to continue to grow the revenue side of their business. And on the profit side, they've got to just start dumping some of the losing ideas, like some of the big content stuff they went after. Content is extraordinarily crowded. And Netflix, HBO, you've got unbelievable competition in that for consumer eyeballs. There's only so much we can watch. And I think Roku, being the middleman, or the interface that we use, is their best bet, and that's where they're going.
Yeah, 2 years ago they said we're not going to get into the content game, and then 2022 they come out and they said they're going to get in the content game, and we all know from the other streamers that's a losing money proposition at this point as they expand their footprint. But they don't have earnings until the 27th of April. Do you have an earnings score based on this data?
Yeah, right now we're neutral, and it's because of the recent run in the stock. Overall, we really like where the company's going. It's a good trajectory turn, but would like to see the stock pull back a little bit. If we get those opportunities, it could go bullish pretty easily.
All right, great stuff, great data. As always, Andy, appreciate it.